I knew she didn't read the contract when she fired me mid-demo, but even before that, before the lights, the countdown, the investor camera grid, I knew the ship was already cracking. You don't survive 6 years at a place like Pelion Dynamics without learning to spot the stress lines early. I'd seen it in the way she rearranged the office furniture during her first week, like power could be feng shuied into place. I saw it in the way she said legacy like it was a slur. But the moment it all started unraveling, that was when Annika Trask, VP of Flash over Substance, crown princess of LinkedIn motivational quotes, snapped her fingers during a live investor demo and said, "You're fired. Walk off. Now." No warning, no sidebar. Just a cold, clipped order in front of 27 streaming investor feeds and the entire senior team. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask questions. I just stepped out of frame, and as I walked away, I could feel it. The shift. The way the air changed, the way silence suddenly got loud. If you're still listening, take a second to subscribe and hit like. 97% of folks listen without supporting the channel, and it truly helps the team keep stories like this alive. So, what had I done to earn such a dramatic public execution? I had disagreed, quietly, specifically. 2 weeks earlier, she'd had her rebranding agency gut our back-end workflow like it was a Pinterest board. They sliced through our compliance structure, API verification stack, and encrypted credential routing like they were cutting carbs. I flagged it, gently. She dismissed me, loudly. "We've evolved past that legacy mess," she'd said. "We're not building for 2017. Right. Except the SEC doesn't care what year your logo was updated. Annika had no idea how our systems were strung together, how much of the infrastructure still relied on protocols I had personally secured and registered under a consulting arm I owned, Lockright Systems, not for ego, for indemnity, because I knew companies like this. She was too busy planning the fireworks-laced New Year demo, the one where we'd show off Pelion's new investor dashboard, complete with real-time back-end sync. They called it the Livewire Vision. Catchy. But under the hood, it was still mine. She hadn't read the full term sheet. Page 3, subsection 7.3c. That clause? That was my insurance. Ongoing employment of credentialed advisor shall be considered material to deal continuation. You'd think a VP with a law degree would read that line before throwing the credentialed advisor under a bus live on Zoom. The lead investor, Mark Garrison from Brilliant Partners, unmuted his mic not 5 seconds after I left frame. "Wait, excuse me, did she just fire her?" No one answered. "Because our $52 million term sheet is contingent on her employment. That's on page 3. So, who are you?" No response. In that moment, Annika realized something. Optics can't fix legal blunders. She looked around, eyes darting, already reaching for some spin. But spin doesn't work when you've triggered a live compliance clause during a broadcast. And that was just the beginning. By early December, the office didn't feel like the same place I'd given 6 years to. Everything looked polished, sleek signage, branded espresso cups, fake plants in symmetrical pots. But beneath the new veneer, the guts were rotting. Annika's strategy consultants had come in like they were Marie Kondoing our entire infrastructure. But compliance doesn't spark joy. It either passes audit or it doesn't. They started rewriting internal processes like we were a lifestyle brand instead of a company sitting on the edge of a $52 million term sheet. The DevOps framework got streamlined, which is code for, we don't know what we're doing, but we'll make it pretty. The investor credentialing database was rerouted through a new front-end module that broke encryption handshakes. And don't get me started on the token system. They basically duct-taped access control across modules that had been surgically separated for a reason. I sent flags, notes, quiet warnings. I logged changes with inline comments, hoping anyone would pay attention. The reply I got from Annika? "We've outgrown the old backbone." That was her whole argument. That, because she had a vision board, we didn't need a stable spine. After that, I stopped getting invites to meetings, strategy syncs, launch huddles, investor prep sessions. None of it included me. At one point, I overheard her call me legacy overhead to someone on a call. But even as she was pruning me out of the picture, she didn't realize something. I wasn't just in the background. I was in the foundation. One night, I couldn't sleep. Something had been gnawing at me, so I pulled up the digital license repository. And there it was, my name. Still listed on 3 active back-end license agreements filed with the SEC, documents that hadn't been updated since before her hiring. Those licenses weren't just symbolic, they were tied to legal clauses, specifically Clause 7.3c in the investor term sheet. I remember writing it. It was during the restructure 2 years prior when Pelion brought in outside capital and needed compliance armor. The clause had been designed as a safeguard, an insurance policy. It stated, in plain terms, ongoing employment of credentialed advisor per subsection 7.3c is material to deal continuation. Translation: fire me without notice or investor acknowledgement, and the term sheet is voided. She hadn't read that far. Of course she hadn't. She was too busy picking brand colors. I didn't say anything at the time. There was no need, because from that moment on, I wasn't just the overlooked advisor. I was the quiet tripwire, and she was marching right toward it in heels that matched the logo redesign. New Year's morning smelled like burnt coffee and fake optimism. Everyone was overdressed, over-rehearsed, and under-informed. Pelion's demo war room had been transformed into a stage. Ring lights, executive backdrop banners, a 2026 vision slogan on repeat across every screen like a cult mantra. There was even a branded fruit tray, because God forbid a pitch deck go live without kiwi slices and gluten-free mini muffins. I was in the back, headset on, monitoring voice routing for the investor Zoom feed. Not presenting, not spotlighted, just ensuring the back end stayed smooth while Anika played conductor to her carefully curated circus. She was in full form. Power blazer, polished teeth, tech speak buzzwords dripping like syrup. She strutted from camera to camera as if she'd founded the damn company. The countdown hit 0. The slide deck faded in. 27 investors from 5 time zones leaned in, and then, at 9:01 a.m., she stopped. Mid-sentence, turned, looked directly at me and said, "You're fired. Walk off. Now." No context, no lead-up. It wasn't a correction, it was theater. She wanted dominance, live, on tape. She wanted to show she had the guts to clean house, even if the house she just bulldozed was the structural beam holding up the damn roof. I stared at her for maybe 2 seconds. No words, no expression, just stillness. Then I took off the headset, placed it neatly on the table, and walked out of frame. Silence. Dead air. Her smile held for one heartbeat too long before twitching. And that's when it happened. Mark Garrison, the lead investor from Brellian Partners, the man whose signature would release $52 million in Series C capital, unmuted his mic. "Wait," he said slowly, brows furrowing. "Did she just fire her?" No response. He leaned closer to the screen, like that would somehow explain the stupidity he'd just witnessed. "Because our $52 million term sheet is contingent on her employment," he said, voice flat now. "That's on page 3. So, who are you?" Nobody moved. Someone in legal blinked too fast. Someone else reached to mute their camera and clicked the wrong thing, making their face full screen instead. Anika's mouth opened, then closed. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. You could see it. The moment she registered, she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Not just HR level, not just PR level, but deal killing, litigation inviting, career shrinking stupid. Because in all her meetings with branding firms and stage managers, she'd never thought to read past the headline of the deal memo, page 3, clause 7.3c. A clause she thought didn't matter because the woman it protected didn't speak in boardrooms or post on LinkedIn. And now, that clause had just interrupted her performance mid-applause, not with a bang, but with a question she couldn't answer. "Who are you?" The call never resumed. After Mark Garrison's question hung in the air like a guillotine, no one knew what to say. No one dared to breathe wrong. The cameras stayed on, but the performance was over. The polished pitch deck sat abandoned mid-slide, frozen on a slide titled Pelion, the Future of Scalable Trust. Ironic, really. The silence was worse than shouting. It was the sound of reputations imploding in real time. Anika didn't speak. I imagine in her mind, she was flipping back through documents she never read, trying to scan for something that would undo what she'd just done. But there was no undo button for this kind of mistake. Because she hadn't just fired me. She had detonated a legal landmine that I'd carefully buried months earlier, back when she first started scrubbing out legacy roles and replacing substance with sparkle. Clause 7.3c, subsection, IV in the investor term sheet. I remembered writing it. It had taken 3 weeks of negotiation with counsel. The phrasing had been surgical. Material advisor may not be terminated without 30-day notice and written acknowledgement by lead investor. Breach of this condition shall be considered grounds for immediate reevaluation and potential voiding of term agreement. In plain English, you fire me without notice and the deal dies. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even emotional. It was procedural. She didn't know it existed because she never asked, never listened, never read past the bolded headlines her consultants handed her. She thought she could turn me into a stage prop. Instead, I turned out to be the tripwire wired directly into the floor beneath her. Compliance didn't care about her vision board. The lead investors didn't care about her blazer or her TikTok-ready branding campaign. They cared about due diligence, and now that clause was blinking red across every legal dashboard in the deal chain. The moment I stepped off that call, it triggered an automatic review. Internal compliance flagged the termination timestamp. Brellion's legal team was pinged within minutes. Secondary investors paused their fund transfers pending clarification. And just like that, everything froze. The runway vanished. The metrics meant nothing, because her pride had just unplugged $52 million in capital, all by trying to make a show of firing someone whose name she never bothered to learn how to spell. I didn't gloat. Didn't text anyone. I just sat on my porch with a lukewarm cup of coffee and watched the wind move through bare tree branches, knowing exactly what kind of chaos was now playing out behind locked Zoom rooms. She'd gone for a power move and walked straight into a wall built with my initials. It started about 15 minutes after the call went dark. Annika and the executive team must have been scrambling behind the scenes, trying to slap duct tape over a clause that wasn't going to budge. But then the second hammer dropped, a quieter one. And this time it didn't come from a contract. It came from the code. Compliance logs began lighting up like a Christmas tree. The license key embedded in the demo backend, specifically the one authenticating API calls through our investor dashboard, suddenly failed validation, not because it was broken, but because it was no longer authorized. They had fired the credential holder. Me. And that license? It didn't belong to Pelion. It belonged to Lockright Systems, my consulting LLC registered and verified. During a system overhaul 2 years prior, I'd structured it that way on purpose. It wasn't about power. It was about integrity. Because when you're the one responsible for building the skeleton of a system meant to survive audits, funding rounds, and board turnover, you make sure the bones don't rot the moment someone with good hair and bad judgment decides they're smarter than everyone who came before. The kill switch wasn't dramatic. No fireworks, no access denied pop-up. It was simple, quiet. A silent rule in the license verification protocol. Any attempt to use the Lockright cert without active consulting agreement would auto-expire tokens and flag usage to investors tied to the system's monitoring dashboard, which is exactly what happened. Her team, too rushed, too proud, too shallow, had used my credentials in the demo package without renewing the underlying agreement, probably because they assumed I was legacy, that my role ended the minute Annika said so on camera. So when they pushed the investor packet live, it hit the gateway, ran the check, failed validation, and triggered a compliance cascade. Within the hour, 2 of the platform's partner APIs went into sandbox mode, not out of spite, but out of liability. If they detected an unauthorized license, they weren't going to risk being part of a funding fraud scenario. By noon, 4 investors had paused pending NDAs. One had already forwarded the license violation to their general counsel. No one called me. They didn't need to. My phone buzzed once, an automated alert from the logging system I still monitored out of habit. That ping was the sound of Pelion's demo framework collapsing in real time. Not because I fought back, not because I sabotaged anything, but because I had built it with standards. And those standards included consequences. Consequences Annika never considered, because she assumed the tech side was like a Pinterest board. You could rearrange it whenever the mood struck. But this wasn't mood. This was math. You don't fire the architect and keep using the keys like nothing happened. And now, the foundation she thought she controlled was slipping out from under her. Not with a bang, but with a log file. They held an emergency board meeting that afternoon, video only, cameras off, mics glitching under the weight of their own panic. I wasn't invited, of course. That ship had sailed the second Annika decided to use my exit as a performance stunt. But I knew it was happening, because I could feel it, like pressure behind drywall right before it bursts. The license pings had failed. That wasn't speculation. It was logged, time-stamped, and mirrored to our investor compliance network. The back-end certifications tied to Lockright systems, the ones they tried to keep using and without renewal, were now officially flagged. Pelion's internal team tried to backtrack, sent out soft pings, clarification memos, a few calls to tertiary investors with vague language like temporary license lapse and legacy transition delay. But it didn't matter. The system had done its job. Credential pings had bounced. Investor dashboards showed red across every critical compliance field. The term sheet had already been suspended for review, which meant no one was signing anything until legal dug through the rubble. Annika's fallback CEO candidate, the one she had been softly courting ever since she took the VP chair, was supposed to step in that week to provide leadership clarity. But when he saw the data breach flags and the advisory clause breach linked directly to the $52 million hold, he passed. Politely, wouldn't even return her second call. Meanwhile, I stayed silent. Didn't tweet, didn't post, didn't return the ping from someone on the finance team who messaged, "Hey, just curious if you're available for a quick chat writ to the license?" Instead, my LLC filed a formal notice of breach and misuse with the compliance regulator. The filing was simple, factual, emotionless. Unauthorized commercial use of license, bound by consulting agreement without active contract. Termination executed in direct violation of Clause 7.3c. Certification logs enclosed. I didn't ask for compensation. Not yet. That came later. But that filing did exactly what I needed it to do. It documented the misconduct before they could spin it. And while I wasn't in the emergency board meeting, I know what happened in there, because my name was said. I know that because two people, quietly, off the record, texted me versions of the same line later that night. They keep saying your name like it's a password they forgot. Funny how that works. 6 years of being invisible, until the one moment they needed access, and the only person who could give it to them was the one they'd publicly erased. There's no panic quite like executive panic. It's not loud. It's slow, spread thin across 15 emails, 3 voicemail apologies, and 1 frantic investor trying not to show he's already pulling out. And me? I was home. Fireplace on. Phone face down. The system was doing what it was built to do, enforce the rules they forgot they agreed to. They tried to move forward without the person holding the foundation. And now they were sitting in a boardroom with no table beneath them. By Friday afternoon, the resignation letter still hadn't been sent, but everyone knew it was already written. They called it draft mode in the exec Slack, but inside counsel had already forwarded it to PR for soft language edits. The timestamps didn't lie. Pelion's legal consultants, external, high-billed, and suddenly more listened to than the VP herself, had reviewed everything. Not just the failed license pings, not just the clause breach, but the pattern. Their summary memo was a polite dagger. Willful violation of contingent employment clause. Not a mistake. Not oversight. Willful. That word changed the entire tone of the fallout. It moved the board from damage control to damage containment. Annika, the board's shiny new VP, the visionary, the public face of their rebrand, was now a liability, one that cost them compliance status, deal flow, and internal confidence in under 90 seconds. I hadn't asked for an apology. What I sent instead was a formal invoice. Lockright Systems, termination and license deactivation settlement line. 1. Consulting back pay, final month, prorated. Line 2, license misuse penalty, per section 9A. Line 3, platform revalidation audit, with documentation support. Line 4, clause 7.3c, termination triggered license deactivation. 5.8 Mart, no commentary. No emotion, just numbers. And they paid it. All of it. No negotiation, no red lines, not even a follow-up call. Because by that point, they knew. The clause was airtight, the license breach was documented, and any pushback would mean opening themselves up to regulatory scrutiny they weren't built to survive. Paying me off was cheaper than discovery. And more importantly, it was quieter. Annika was advised to step aside amicably. The board wanted it to look clean. No press release, no fallout, just a graceful exit slide in the next investor deck. She didn't argue. What could she say? That she'd fired someone on camera without reading the one clause that tied her entire pitch to legal compliance. That she'd pushed a live demo with stolen credentials from a terminated advisor. There's no spin that works when your ego's the headline and the receipts are time-stamped. Her legacy, as curated as it was, now lived in one corner of an internal memo titled Process Gaps, Q1 License Risk. Meanwhile, I took a walk that evening. Long coat, hands in pockets, not angry, not vindicated, just still. Because some wins don't come with applause. They come with wire transfers. The new investor packet dropped the following week. Revised, simplified, sanitized. Gone were the high-gloss headshots and brand metaphors about agile vision and human-centered disruption. This one was clinical. Black text on a white background, no gradients, no fireworks, and one name was conspicuously missing. Annika Trask, VP of Strategic Vision, vanished. Not a demotion, not a reassignment, just erased. Where her name used to sit under Project Lead and Point of Contact, there was a new entry. Lockright Systems, Compliance Continuity Partner. No title, no face, no bio, just institutional weight. I wasn't on Peleon's payroll anymore, by design. I didn't want the seat back. Didn't want the meetings or the optics or the forced grins in elevator rides. But the systems they pitched to investors still ran on infrastructure I designed, licenses I held, protocols only I could revalidate, and that's what mattered. Because in the eyes of their capital partners, the role didn't require a face. It required integrity, continuity, proven function. They tried to replace that with aesthetics. But you can't brand over trust. Behind the scenes, I knew exactly how it worked now. Every investor login, every audit ping, every data packet moving through the back end hit a verification checkpoint with Lockright's signature buried deep inside the payload. They couldn't remove it. They tried, twice. The first time, the dashboards broke. The second time, one of the security tokens triggered a sandbox cascade that required a 7-hour rollback. After that, they left it alone. And Annika? Her LinkedIn stayed active for a while, still listed Peleon in her headline, still tagged old teammates in performative posts about resilience and next chapters, but no one interacted, no likes, no comments, just digital silence. Until one day, quietly and without fanfare, her profile changed. Peleon disappeared. The branding agency she loved so much wasn't listed either, just a line that said, exploring opportunities. It didn't even make me feel good. It just felt fitting. She wanted to make her name unforgettable, and instead, she became a redacted line in a revised PDF. Meanwhile, the licenses kept humming. No drama, no spotlight, just uptime. That was the difference. She chased the title. I built the tag they couldn't delete. Every January, like clockwork, it pings me. Not a person, not a message, just a system check. Silent, automatic, precise. One of Peleon's demo packets goes live, polished and chirpy, all warm smiles and curated optimism for whatever fiscal fantasy they're selling that year. They add new faces, new taglines, new metrics, but the core? Still mine. Behind all the flash, a back-end handshake quietly calls home to a non-revocable keychain still tied to Lockright Systems. They never talk about it. They wouldn't dare. But it's there. A fingerprint they couldn't scrub out, hard-coded into the architecture of their investor authentication flow. They tried once. Some new DevOps hire with a little too much swagger and not enough history. He removed the credential path manually, rerouted the token sequence, and thought he'd done something clever. The whole system broke within 6 minutes. Investor dashboards went dark. Audit trail collapsed mid-transmission. They had to roll everything back, manually, under pressure, with calls flying in from East Coast firms, wondering why the new demo failed its checksum validation. After that, no one touched it again. Now, every January, I get the same ping, same port, same origin. My server doesn't respond with anything flashy. No logs, no alert, just a quiet ping back. Confirmation. That they remember. Not out of fear, out of need. The structure they built still leans on the thing they tried to throw away. I don't celebrate it. I don't even mention it. But every time that signal lands in my logs, it reminds me legacy isn't a logo, it's a shadow they can't unhook, and mine stretches through every corner they tried to repaint.